This Detroit News Podcast is brought to you by Varsity Ford of Ann Arbor.
All right. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of the Tigers Today podcast powered by DetroitNews.com. It is Wednesday, August 19th. Tigers, against all odds, remain in a playoff race. They started the day 4.5 back of the White Sox in the AL Central. Still a game back of the wild card with a whole bunch of teams still hunting for that final wild card spot. Tigers, the roller coaster season, as AJ Hinch has referred to it, is continuing. They're wrapping up the series in Pittsburgh today before moving on. But 61-65 and still in the playoff mix. We want to talk about this playoff race, this Wild American League, with our guests this week. Pleased to be joined, as always a pleasure to have him on the podcast from MLB Network. John Paul Morosi joins us. JP, how are you?
Tony, it is great to be with you, my friend. And listen, we usually just talk in the press box, catch up on all things. And now everyone gets to drop in on the banter in the press box there. So honored to be with you, my friend. Keep up all the great work that you do.
You too. Welcome back from the Field of Dreams. You're fresh out of the cornfield. How was that?
Oh, it was amazing. And one of my favorite stories from it, there was a great photo that a photographer from the local newspaper, and I love, by the way, supporting local newspapers. So there's a great one there in Dubuque. And there was a funny moment where somehow, and I've got to thank former Tiger Ryan Kreidler for making this possible, because Ryan, of course, plays for the Twins now, and his dad, as you know, is a sports writer. So was hanging out around the batting cage with Ryan during the Twins BP, just talking, catching up. And up walks Barry Bonds. And so here's Barry, and Ryan introduces himself. I don't think I'd ever actually interviewed Barry in a one-on-one setting before, so I introduced myself as well. And I had this realization as I'm standing there with Ryan and Barry Bonds that we're both just enjoying this interaction of talking hitting with one of the greatest to ever do it. And Barry got into some Leland stories at one point in time, but there was this funny moment that was captured by the photographer of the newspaper there of Barry Bonds, myself, Torrey Hunter, and Anthony Rizzo all talking around the batting cage. And everybody's laughing at me. You just see the back of my balding head in this picture. And my family saw this picture and they said, John, what had you said that made all three of them laugh like that? And I kept thinking about it. I was like, what was going on at that moment? Well, the funny thing was Torrey Hunter, it was Torrey that got everybody laughing. And he had said, hey, Morosi, I saw you yesterday walking around here looking like Doc Graham with your vest and your hat and all the old-timey stuff. And then I realized those pants you were wearing were probably from Lululemon. I was like, you know what? You might be right, Torrey. Everybody started laughing. So you can sense, Tony, that Torrey Hunter, his sense of humor remains in absolute all-star form from his time with the Tigers.
That is a special company to be in. That's phenomenal. How many times have you been to the Field of Dreams, and how's that game doing? Because we saw the TV ratings weren't great this year, but it's such a cool visual to me. I mean, I've been there. It's really neat. If you have been there, for any baseball fan, it is a bucket list item. I mean, what do you make of that? It's been a few years now. They're coming back with the game next year.
A few different dimensions there, Tony. I think number one, it is a gorgeous spectacle, and you're pointing out what it's like to be there. And as Midwesterners, it's a place that we come by very naturally. You're driving through the cornfields, and for me, I grew up around Bay City. Worked a summer on a cornfield and a corn farm, so I'm used to that vista. But it's certainly a joy to be able to be there and to welcome these major league teams flying into Little Dubuque Airport and taking the bus over. It is an amazing experience. I was able to play catch with Jeremy Guthrie over on the movie side. I brought my glove. It's the only assignment, Tony, that someone like you or I could credibly bring our glove and say, yeah, it's just part of the job today. Mm-hmm. If I brought my glove to go cover the next Tigers White Sox series and I was running around the field with my glove on, AJ might say, Morosi, what are you doing? So, but there it's totally normal. It's totally expected and encouraged. So I had the glove with me, and it does take you back to the essence of why you love the game. So all those things are very, very true. I saw the ratings. I realized what you're talking about too there. I'm always of the mind, first of all, it's difficult to look at a 1-to-1 ratio of viewership when you're talking about a streaming service like Netflix, what was broadcast television on Fox before. This is also, to me, a much broader audience, and there's also other reasons to do it. This is an event that a lot of MLB sponsors love because people like to come to the Field of Dreams and experience it. There was a really big Budweiser activation, which I didn't even realize there was beer that had been brewed using it was Beechwood aged using bats that were like Morosi bats, the official MLB bat. So how about that? Legitimately Beechwood aged with actual major league bats. I'm mentioning that as there are a lot of unique features that do well for the sponsors and partners of MLB that I've learned are also very important to the overall business endeavor. The players love it. The fans who are there love it. You bring the game to a place in the country that doesn't often see major league games. So, like, for a lot of reasons, I look at it as being much more important than whatever the viewership number is. And I would imagine, Tony, that with the game being back on broadcast television next year with NBC, I would expect the viewership numbers will jump up again.
Right, for sure. Where does the Field of Dreams in Dyersville rank on your, and we'll talk about the Tigers here really quickly, but just getting this out of the way, where does that rank on baseball bucket list trips? Because I hadn't gone until a couple of years ago, and I was covering a football game in Iowa, and I'm like, I have to go. I'm here. I had a car. I drove out there. I'm going to go. I'm got to see it, and I'm glad I did. But like, you go to Cooperstown a lot. I know Cooperstown is very close to your heart. There's Williamsport. There's stadiums galore. Where would you rank if you had to do the 3 bucket list ranking? What would you put it?
Wow. So I would say as a baseball fan, if you have not been to Wrigley, you got to go to Wrigley. I know a lot of Midwesterners have, and so but I would mention that you got to go there. Fenway is also very unique, and I went to college out there, so I've got a lot of really warm memories of
Where'd
Fenway.
you go to college?
Harvard. I was let in by mistake, Tony. They let me in by mistake. They thought there's no way that this kid from Essexville, Michigan, will be able to find his way to campus. And so, my parents and I, against considerable odds, loaded up our beautiful Ford Windstar with a "Say Ya to the UP" bumper sticker on the back of it, and somehow found our way to Harvard Yard. I'll tell you the full version of the story sometime, Tony, but it was an experience. Be that as it may, Fenway. I remember my best friend from growing up, Kyle O'Neill. One day he came to visit me. He went to U of M, and we snuck into Fenway. And one day in January, we probably weren't supposed to be there, and hanging out on the bullpen phone. There's probably a police record with my name on it in Boston somewhere for walking around Fenway when I was 19 years old or whatever. Yeah, it's in there somewhere. But we had a ton of fun there, and so I would say Fenway is unique. Dodger Stadium, I think, is one of the most beautiful places to see a game. So for the major league product, the major league scene, I would say those 3. I know I'm kind of going beyond my initial allotment, but they're all in different buckets and categories. I would say to go to the Field of Dreams is very high on that list. Williamsport is special. We're actually going there this weekend. Cooperstown, unbelievable. I love visiting there in the winter. But I would say this too, Tony. A lot of my favorite bucket list experiences are outside the U.S. You got to go to a game if you can at the Tokyo Dome and experience that. I've been to baseball in Korea. Baseball in Taiwan is unbelievable. And then, of course, Latin America. I've had the pleasure of I saw a game in Cuba once. I mean, so I would always say if you have a chance to get to an international atmosphere and experience a game, whether it's NPB, international baseball, Mexico has great crowds, just go, because it's one of those cool experiences, Tony, for us where we get to love the game and here in Michigan and small towns maybe. Well, then you go to the big places all around the world and realize they love the sport in some ways even more passionately than we do in the States. And it is a really inspiring experience.
Yeah, I think that really came through this year, even on television with the World Baseball Classic. And you and I have talked about that. And you were front and center with the World Baseball Classic from the beginning when it really was brand new and we weren't sure if it was going to work. But man, and we'll talk about this down the road again sometime when we have more time. But the way it came through on television this year, it arrived this year.
Yeah. Oh, There's nothing like it. Nothing like it. And there, I will say this quick little story. There was a member of one of the coaching staffs, I'm not going to say who it was, but that was involved in the Final Four, who then got back to his respective major league camp on March 22nd, and then looks out at a BP before a Grapefruit League game on a Tuesday and just looked around and said, "This stinks." like what are we doing? Where's my crowd of 45,000 all playing musical instruments and screaming their hearts out? My parents actually came down to a few games, Tony. I was really, really happy. They still live in the Bay City area. They came down to Houston to see some of the games. U.S. Mexico, unbelievable. Mexico Italy, unbelievable. U.S. Italy. I mean, all these games are incredible. And one of my favorite stories about it, and we'll get back to the Tigers in a second, is Mexico lost to the U.S. Okay, they lost to the U.S. in a certainly a difficult loss for Team Mexico. We're leaving the stadium, and there is a massive group of people cheering and dancing and singing around a mariachi band on the corner of right next to the ballpark in Houston. Mexican fans, their team had just lost. The party goes on no matter what, and that is the same ethos of the World Cup, which I was very lucky to cover a number of games of this summer. That's the same idea, Tony. We are fortunate to be among the people who are there and who love these sports that bring the world together. And the results are the results. And obviously you cheer for your team. But as soon as the game is over, it's as if this appreciation of being there, I get goosebumps talking about it. The appreciation is what you lean into. And man, is that just magic when you see it. And when people are dancing, their team lost. Who cares? We're here watching a baseball game. Let's just think about the world and what we're doing here and how grateful we are. So never lose sight of that, just what it means to be in the venue, no matter what the scoreboard says, no matter if you're a Mariner fan who just had your team lose 22-0 last night. We're all watching baseball and experiencing that. And I think the World Baseball Classic, especially the Mexican fans, Tony, they bring such a unique grace and passion to what we do.
Absolutely. That's it. All right. We had you on to talk Tigers, so let's do that, because this has been a wild season, a roller coaster. AJ Hinch has called it. I mean, they were bad out of the gate. They were good lately. Then they've slipped. They had a chance to go into first place. Now they're 4 under 500 with today's game pending. This AL race that's going on right now, I believe 6 teams are outside the wild card race as of right now when we're taping this, within 3 games of that final wild card spot, and Tigers being one of them. First of all, is that good for baseball? Because that's the question we get now. You know, the Dodgers, are they good for baseball? AJ Przinsky called the Tigers bad for baseball because they traded Tarek Skubal and they're still in the playoff race. This AL race is a playoff race is fun, but it's also mediocre as far as if you look at the overall record. I guess is this good? Is this good parity, I guess?
So you mean my friend AJ Pierzynski, National Polish American Sports Hall of Famer, somehow drew the ire of Tiger fans? No way. That can't be possible.
Right. Never happened.
That can't happen. No. So what I will say is this. I think it's actually great for the game where we're at right now. I know that might not be a popular take, but let's be clear about this. If it were not for the expanded wild card, 3 wild cards now, where would the drama be in the AL playoff picture? Yes, there would be some conversation about the division races, but there are so many more teams that have fans who are watching these races carefully than would otherwise. If we did not have a 3rd wild card, the Jays would be well out of it. The Orioles would be well out of it, and their fan bases would be thinking about 2027. Instead, you have all these fan bases that are incredibly engaged every single day. Tony, I know it's not perfect. It's not the classic Blue Jays Tigers race of 87 that we grew up with. Tony, I realize that. However, given the choice between people caring deeply about baseball and people not caring deeply about baseball, I will always choose people caring about baseball day to day. It's now to the point where, and obviously this is my livelihood and I love this, but how many times a night are we all checking the wild card standings on the app? Multiple times. It's just a constant check. It's like I mentioned the World Cup a moment ago. Remember how on the last day of the group stage of a World Cup, you've got the live standings on the corner of your screen constantly being updated with every single goal? It's like that for us with the AL wildcard race, except for this lasts for 6 weeks. This is what we got. And listen, and this is the magical, wonderful part about baseball. On the day of the trade deadline, Tarek Skubal is traded away, of course, and then Mize on the actual deadline day. You mean to tell me we didn't have Brett Callahan hitting a home run to help the Tigers stay in the race on your bingo card at that point in time? No one had that. No one saw this coming, and that's great. That's what we want. So I realize this is not the classic Giants-Braves race of the early 90s or Tigers and Blue Jays from years ago, but it's what we have. It is meaningful baseball. The Tigers are going to play meaningful baseball in September in the same year that they traded away Tarek Skubal. That is going to happen. Surprising? Perhaps, but it's where we're at, and I, for one, am loving it.
On that point, and was, I know the trade deadline was over 2 weeks ago today. And I don't want to rehash everything about it, but it's still something people are talking about because of AJ Przinsky bringing up what he did about Tigers trading away Skubal. With the Tigers where they were, and given the third wild card and everything like that, how much do you think, how difficult a decision do you think this was for Scott Harris to trade away Tarek Skubal and Casey Mize? And do you believe that he believed this team could stay in the race without those two?
So many fascinating questions, Tony. And it's difficult to know the full calculus behind the scenes. Although what I will say, based on the press availability that Scott gave on the actual deadline day, which probably will remain for at least a while, the most expansive explanation that we get on this was that particular day. Two things stand out to me from that conversation. Number one, that he really truly made that decision after that final game against Baltimore, which on some level it's hard to believe that a decision of that import would hinge on the inability to protect a 7-0 lead with Skubal still on the mound. He was a pitch away from getting out of that inning at any number of times, right? And then the game just spiraled out of control. If they win that game, do they really keep Skubal? Do they wait longer to make the trade? Do they end up getting a better package as a result? It's impossible, and this is the part that I have a little bit of an issue with, that I think we all have to be honest about here. When Harris says that there was no possible way that the Tigers could have gotten a better package, that they got everybody's last and best offer on that Saturday, I just don't. I'm sorry. There's no way to know that. There is no way for him to know where Andrew Friedman's final line was, where Matt Arnold's final line was 2 days later, because everything is fluid. It is not possible to know all of that on Saturday. It's just not, because you don't know how Friedman's going to react, or Arnold, or anybody else that would have been involved, or Alex Anthopoulos jumps up at the last minute and makes an offer. You just don't know. You can be confident, but you can't know that for sure. That's just human nature. It's an unknowable. But I do think that, and I'll give Scott credit for this, he used a lot of the personal pronoun in that statement, that I made the decision. I looked at this. I made the choice. He's taking a lot of responsibility there, where he wasn't putting it on ownership. He wasn't putting it on the rest of the front office. It was is what he was saying a lot of in that explanation, which I admire that in terms of the accountability. We will be able to second guess this from now until the end of time. If Pena ends up being a better player than Zaire Hope, who was reportedly one of the guys the Brewers offered, this will be second guessed a lot. I think that this front office also has some equity built up in drafting very, very well in 2023. Very few teams did better that year than the McGonigal-Clark exacta with those two picks. That's pretty good work. It's also a different job to draft than it is to be able to make the big-time trade. Different skill sets. And, again, we'll see. Time will tell on how all this plays out in the coming years. I do think it's interesting, Tony, that just watching the team play, that they did seem to have a bit of a collective exhale after the deadline was over. Now, was that because there was a weariness of all the talk about Skubal taking up all the oxygen for a while? Maybe. Hard to know. That's for each individual player to answer. I think it's possible. And that's certain. I mean, are they a better team with Skubal and Mize on it? Of course they are. I would never suggest the opposite. But I do think there was a mental release, and maybe that mental release would have happened had they just kept everybody and gone for it. They were playing well out west as the deadline was going on. That's another reality. The other point of this is Scott's contention, and this is a really important thing that maybe was lost in the shuffle a little bit. I'm paraphrasing here, but this is what he basically said, that the team had not played well enough to that point to justify investing or at least giving up on the potential of a Zaire Hope, of a River Ryan at all in the trades that they made, that they hadn't played well enough for Scott to forego the future value of the prospects he got back in order to give up more of his capital to get the relievers that I would say this team really needs if they're going to make a serious run. That was their calculation. I don't know, Tony. They've played pretty well, and their run differential suggests this was not a completely unexpected development. If their run differential was negative 20 and they went on some miracle run, I would say, yeah, it's really hard to expect they would play this well. But the run differential said all along that this was a good team with a horrible month of May that was exacerbated by a pretty abysmal bullpen at different stretches. If you had been differently approaching the bullpen question at various points of the year or even last offseason, would they even be in this position right now? Would they be in this situation right now? Would they have a 5 or 6 game lead? I think that's the other part of the unknowable. I get into some of the unknowables here, but this is the critique here, that if done differently, if approached differently with respect to the bullpen, and if that had been fixed earlier, they may have been able to keep Skubal at this point because they would have been in a very, very far advantageous situation. I think the final point before I send it back to you, and again, I probably opened up a lot of different lines of inquiry, but there are those that believe, the peers in the industry. I heard somebody tell me in the middle of July that had sort of had conversations in the executive class of other teams who basically said, John, my sense is that Scott believes that he should sell or is inclined to sell. Now, he may not have made the decision until the very end, but that his inclination at that point, again, it's from another executive telling me this about what Scott had been saying outwardly, that was their word to other teams was that, you know what, I'm inclined to sell because the team hadn't played well enough to deserve the additional investment of prospects. It's a fascinating place that we're at, but we don't hear much from Scott publicly in terms of like on the record recitation of what the decisions were. So as a result, a lot of this conjecture has happened and will keep happening because there's a lot that we don't know. And yet the thing that I would really push back firmly on is there's just no way to know. In human nature, I've covered deadlines for 2 decades. There's just no way to know that that if you say, okay, I need your last best offer on Saturday, there's no experience in my years of doing this and covering these that tells me that someone's actually going to give you their very, very best offer 48 hours before the deadline is up. It just, that does not seem logical to me.
Yeah, look, there's a lot to unpack there, and and I agree with almost everything you're saying. I will say the month of May, the players have to take the blame for that. And if you look back, it wasn't all injuries because, quite frankly, the Tigers are injured right now. Like, they are not healthy right now. I mean, they still have many of their impact players out. Month of May was so bad. So I put that on the players as, just as much as maybe the injuries, but also Scott saying we didn't play well enough to justify. I covered those last 3 games, as I've said, in Chicago at the end of May, which were some of the worst baseball I've seen and covered in a long, long time. It was a lifeless team, a lifeless locker room. AJ was sick of me. It was bad. It was just a bad, bad week. The worst weekend I've ever had in Chicago that I can remember. But the other thing about the thing was they didn't do any. Scott Harris didn't do anything in May to address what was happening. There were no moves. There was no promotion. You can trade for guys in May too. Like you can trade for relievers. You can get bullpen help.
You can do that.
They didn't do anything. It was like nothing was happening to try to patch this roster together. So I put that a little bit on him, but I have a theory on why he made the trade on Saturday, and this might be a stretch, but Scott Harris also said that he made the decision during that Orioles game, which basically sounds like a fan who threw the remote through the TV. When they gave up the 7-run lead, like, that's it, I'm done with this team. That's what it sounded like. But I have a theory why he made the trade when he did, because I think Scott Harris had made the decision to sell, and he wanted to do it before the Tigers swept the A's and got the fans back into it. Because I feel like if the Tigers swept the A's, the fans would have been all ready to go and back on board, and then they trade Skubal, and then they're like, what the hell are you doing? That's just a theory. I don't know. But I feel like there are general managers out there, I feel there are general managers out there who did not know the Tigers were ready to make a move. We're ready to pull the trigger.
That is one, if you look at it, okay, if you look at the trading history of the Tigers in the time since Harris has come on, he's only made any sort of trades of significance with maybe 5 or 6 teams. And that would be my critique, is that the ability to canvas and to have that real-time information and touch points with 29 other teams to see exactly what the idea is of your players, the value of your players in real time all the time. That is an essential part of the job. Is that an area where he could improve? Only he can say that. I don't know. But that I would look at that and say, if they've only traded with a small percentage of teams, then does that suggest that maybe there are some teams that would be good trade partners if the relationship were stronger interpersonally? That's my feedback as I just look at it outwardly. And again, for having covered this for a couple of decades, that's what I see is the ability to fully assess the value of your players is completely contingent on open channels of communication and trust with your peers and your colleagues around the business. You have to do that. If you're not doing that, it's like you're trying to trade your stocks and half of your trading screen on your brokerage account is like blacked out. You don't see what's going on. You only have half the picture. And that to me is what one could conclude looking at the relatively small number of teams the Tigers have actually executed trades with over that time. I think it's a fascinating insight, Tony, about the timing of everything. And the other thing, again, based on the record stuff from people that were involved, one of the most important things that Andrew Friedman said after the deadline passed that Monday was that there was no pivot for him. It wasn't as though if Skubal's not available, I'm going to turn around and pivot and Tyler Mahle is my guy. No. Skubal was the sun, the moon, and the stars for Andrew Friedman at the deadline this year. Period. End of story. There was no pivot. There was no comparable. There was nothing. And it was only going to potentially increase the closer you get to Monday if there are more teams involved. And every day you wait, it's not as though the value of Tarik Skubal is going to depreciate. He's Tarik Skubal. He had, despite the loss on Wednesday, a pretty darn good start for the Tigers against the Orioles. So it wasn't like his value was going to diminish. If anything, it was going to go up. So it's just the timing of everything remains a little curious to me. And eventually, hey, if Zaire Hope becomes an all-star, if River Ryan helps this team next season, it'll look like a pretty decent trade. But if they end up being a starting pitcher short of actually making a run at this thing at the end of the season, or a reliever short where they probably could have upgraded somewhere to give themselves a bit more of a length of bullpen. Again, they lost some games even over the weekend against the White Sox where bullpen was part of the story. They're awfully close. And this is the other thing, Tony, in a very, very winnable American League. Look around right now. How many teams in this American League, this pathway to the World Series, really scare you? Is anybody? This is a very flawed league. I think that the Rays are a good team. The Yankees, will Aaron Judge play this season? I have no idea. Max Fried back on the injured list. The Red Sox, pretty mercurial. Is there anybody else that you're really worried about? So that's part of the context. I get it. I understand you've got to optimize but you're also not the Milwaukee Brewers. Milwaukee's not Detroit. Tampa Bay is not Detroit. This is a team that not long ago used to have one of the biggest payrolls in the sport. And I think it's fair to look at it and expect that at some point the team should get back to that level.
Yeah. No, and if you look at every team, the top level teams, the Yankees, the Yankees, Red Sox, Rays, the Tigers have taken series from every one of them this year, and they think they've swept the Rays. I mean, there's no one in the American League that I think anyone's afraid of. But look, my theory about doing it before they swept the A's to calm, to get the fans on board, I don't know. That's probably ridiculous. It's probably ridiculous, but anyone who covers the Tigers knows how much this front office pays attention to what fans are saying and how much they pay attention to sports talk radio. I mean, they have their ears everywhere. So
how much they pay attention to Tigers Today with Tony Paul? I mean, let's be real here, Tony. They're listening right now. Let's be real.
Somehow, and this isn't even live, but they've got a way to know what's being said. We just got a few minutes left. How does this American League shake out? American League Central, is it going to be the White Sox? And how incredible are they with what they're doing? I mean, they're not a great team, but they're a fun team. I mean, Chris Getz was laughed at when he got the job. He was laughed at when he made move after move after move after move. And no one's really laughing at them anymore.
A great Grosse Pointe South Blue Devil right there. Mm-hmm. Grosse Pointe South legend, Chris Getz. No, I think they've done a really good job. I think Will Venable is an excellent manager who I'm happy for Will. He's always been a first-class person. He's starting to get the credit he deserves in the industry for being really good at his job and someone that I think is going to be there for a long time. Murakami has changed that lineup in a lot of different ways. I mean, that home run he hit this week at Wrigley, Tony, to left center. Are you kidding me? Mm. That ball still hasn't landed yet in Chicago. Unbelievable swing. And I think he has helped unlock a different dimension of the entire lineup. Sam Antonacci, again, who expected he was going to have this kind of a year? Sean Burke, obviously, in the rotation. Taylor, some others have really emerged. They're a fun team. And they remind me a bit of the Tigers from 2 years ago. A lot of guys in a similar age group that are playing with a lot of spirit and pride about them. They're an easy team to like. They really are. And they probably will find a way to win this division. They've got, again, enough of a lead, and the rest of the division is somewhat flawed, although, again, they just lost 2 straight to the Cubs. So this is just the way it is in the American League. Whatever you think you know. I was like 24 hours ago, Tony, I had said to somebody, hey, the Mariners have won 2 in a row. Maybe they're starting to build something. Well,
2 in a row. That's where we've gotten to in the American League.
2 in a row became 2-2-0 the wrong direction, okay? Little football score. So it's hard to figure this out. The Mariners are listen, the Tigers are a much less frustrating team to be a fan of right now than the Mariners are. The Mariners, what? I mean, their whole situations, Cal Raleigh, whatever happened there, they're underperforming by a disastrous level. The Tigers are actually closer to the team that they probably should be, at least the way they're playing right now. They're fun to watch again. The Mariners I would not describe as being fun to watch. They're agonizing. The Jays have gotten to be fun to watch again. And there's a team that if I look at it, when they get to full health, they're going to be scary, I think, for the rest of the AL wildcard teams to contend with, because they've got, I think, a really good manager, excellent closer in Varland, elite. Max is pitching like Max again. And to me, it's fun. I love watching Max compete. I've always been an admirer of his. And to see what he's done there, going out there and pitching really well of late is fun. I mean, and to see the notion of Max pitching in a really important game in September, October, I love it. So that's going to be a lot of fun if they keep going. So they've had a similar experience to the Tigers where they sold at the deadline, but then they got, and I think in some ways, Tony, they returned more of the right now pieces than the Tigers have, because their version of Zaire Hope was Bateman, and he's already in the big leagues. He doesn't maybe have Hope's ceiling, but he's already playing center field. Jose Soriano is their version of River Ryan. Different type of trade, but he's already starting and pitching well for them in the major league. So I think Toronto's front office did an expert job. They also brought in Josh Smith of making some future trades and some right now trades. I probably like their roster the best, Tony, if I'm being honest right now. But the Tigers, there's still a lot to like, and they've got some fun stories the way that some of the kids have come up. Clark has cooled off, obviously, since the initial burst. And I think that we're maybe seeing now why some said, oh, why didn't they call him up sooner? Well, this is why. There are some adjustments that have to be made once the book gets out on you in baseball. And obviously now, Tony, that happens faster than ever before.
Right. His glove is still good, and that plays
really good.
That helps with this team.
He is at least approximating what Meadows gave them.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say this, Tony, he is better than I thought he was going to be as a defensive outfitter. That he has gone above my expectations in that regard. So I think good on him with that. I also think it's important to point out, and certainly I was among those who maybe a year ago said, should they have given up a bit more of their farm system to bring in a reliever that might have allowed them to beat the Mariners in that series, for example. But some of their internal guys, Bryce Rayner's numbers have been really good, especially of late. Max Anderson keeps hitting. He's back healthy now. They've got a pretty decent farm system still, even with some of the guys that have graduated. So I think that they deserve some credit, Ryan Garco and his group, and certainly the drafting group. The foundation of the organization is solid. And I think that as much as people want to critique what they did at the deadline, and I think there's reasons to do that, you must also acknowledge that the farm system is in a pretty good place, even as some of their key guys have graduated now to the major leagues.
Right. Just wanted to touch on one point, and you mentioned Max a little bit ago. Tiger fans, one of their big complaints they always like to say is that, Mike Ilitch, he was a fan and he would never let Tarek Skubal walk, and when he let Max Scherzer walk. So yeah. I don't know that, and he put out a press release basically saying that Max turned down a pretty good offer, and then Max,
Yeah, no, and that's a very good point. That was, and again, David Price left or was traded the next year, right? So when you think about that, that amazing rotation didn't last forever, of course. And the one thing, and I'll be fascinated, not that we'll actually ever be able to get the full readout, Tony, of all the back and forth of this, but when you look at this, and so recent hitting performance aside, they obviously gave out the big extension to Keith right as he made his debut. You wonder about Dingler. And was there a moment where they could have gotten him signed long-term earlier? If you look at the numbers, Dylan Dingler is one of the 5 or 10 most valuable players in the entire sport right now, okay, period. Everywhere in baseball. A catcher who can do that is incredibly valuable. Obviously, you look at the toll on the catcher's body and look at Cal Raleigh's regression. Different player, obviously, but there are few things in baseball, Tony, that matter more than a catcher who is at the heartbeat of all that you do as a team. Dingler is that. And as much as the Tigers hate what they went through with Skubal, to be fair, Dingler's in that lineup on more days of the week than Skubal ever was. And if you're starting to think about how expensive it might be to sign him and or how close he's getting to free agency, we're not that far away, everybody, from wondering, hey, what's going on with Dingler? Hey, what's going on with Riley Green? You got to know your own guys and who the guys are to extend and who the guys are that you can go year to year with and then bid adieu when it's time. And again, Keith has been solid. I think he's been a solid player for them. Hao Yuli's been really good. I think he's actually come on and played better than expected. That's why this team is so much fun, Tony, because on a day you could say, man, like they got this thing going. On the other days, they might say, man, like where'd they go wrong? This is a team that is, you can see in them whatever you want to see. If you want to be optimistic, you can see that. If you want to be a pessimist, be my guest, because there are reasons for that too. I think that's why this team, among all these in the AL wildcard race, is really, really fun to talk about.
Oh, no doubt. Dylan Dingler, I will say, you talk about the toll of the catcher. He is going through it. I mean,
he's going through it right now, 100%. It's hard.
That's going to happen. But you're right. Dylan Dingler and Riley Green are the two guys on that roster who you worry about what are you going to be able to keep them long term. If I had to pick two more guys to sign long term, it'd be those guys. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. So, last thing for you before I let you go, appreciate you joining us. Sure. How does the American League play out? White Sox are going to win the division? You think so? They're 50% right now. By the way, they're 50% according to Fangraphs, which doesn't seem like a lot for a team with a 4.5 game lead, but they were 1.5% to start the season. I don't know how they figured that out, but they're 1.5% to make the playoffs to start the season. Now they're 50% to make the playoffs.
All these formulas, Tony, just like wins above replace. We don't know how you do it, and so that's why I always say wins above replacement should not determine how you vote for your awards, because you show me that formula and we can't even agree on what the formula is between Baseball Reference, Fangraphs. I don't know. So, but I do think the White Sox win the division. I do believe that the Jays eventually get the last spot. I just think they've got a little bit more left in the tank than the Tigers do. I think it's gonna come down to the last couple days, which is fun. And by the way, shades of '87, you got a Tigers Blue Jays series in Toronto mid-September. If you're ever going to go up there and watch a game, I realize we all have work and school and everything else going on, but that would be a fun series to watch. Or even if you can't get up all the way, drive up to London, which is the halfway point, and just find a tie. There's like, from what I've been told, there's a Tigers bar there. There's some Blue Jays bars. So find that spot where there's a reason why Ernie Harwell's in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, which is because everyone in Southern Ontario for many, many years, Ernie was their voice because they got the Tigers game. So there's tons of Tiger fans there in Ontario. So maybe if you can't go all the way to Toronto, just get to London and find a good Tiger bar and enjoy the home of the London Tigers back in the day. Travis Fryman playing for then manager Rob Thompson eventually went on to manage the Phillies. So a little bit of storytelling there for you. But I do think the Jays eventually get the last wild card and Houston wins the West. Forever I've been wanting to say, oh, the Mariners are coming. The Mariners are coming. I don't know, Tony. After last night, I'm not sure they are.
I did not know that Ernie Harwell was in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. But we talked to start the podcast about bucket list and stadiums. On underrated, well, not talked about enough is Rogers Center. And I've enjoyed. If you haven't been there, it's looked at as an older ballpark because in today's age it is. But they've renovated it beautifully. Every time I go there, I can't believe how loud it is. Even when the Blue Jays weren't good, that's a stadium that, for that Tigers Blue Jays series, if you can get up there, that's one of my favorites.
Great baseball fans, amazing city, right downtown. Go around, go see have a true sports day. You can go to the Hockey Hall of Fame and then walk over and go to the baseball game 5 blocks apart. It's amazing. If you ever need recommendations, just ask me. I'm more than happy to help. And by the way, if you really are enterprising, this is my favorite thing to do, Tony, is to fly when I've been able to do it for work purposes. Fly on Porter out of Windsor to the downtown Billy Bishop Airport, and you can get this. Only place I know of in the major leagues where you can do this. Walk from the terminal to the ballpark. So many times you land. There's a little tunnel that goes under the little harbor and the little river inlet there. You go under the tunnel, you get up onto the main road, and you walk to the ballpark. No cab, no car, nothing. Just plane. Perfect. That's my recommendation.
Wow. That's what I was going to say about Toronto, too. It's easy for us to say go to Toronto. It's a great city, but it's also a lot easier to go to when you're on an expense account. So.
Yeah. I had to learn I did 3 of the World Cup games I covered were in Toronto. So I had to learn, Tony, I'm giving all kinds of travel advice here. Drive up to the Oakville GO train, park there in the lot, and then take the train downtown. It's on the west side of town, so it cuts down your driving time. So, do not drive your car into downtown Toronto. Do not do that. The GO train in Oakville, that's my recommendation. I got there. I did a few games there during the World Cup, had a tremendous experience, and that was my routine. GO train, take the train, you're all good.
I got you. Great stuff. All right. I always take the train from Windsor usually when I go, which has always been good.
Via rail. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. All right. JP Morosi, always appreciate you joining us. Great insight as always. Where are you off to next?
So going to Williamsport actually this weekend. So I'll be there, the Little League Classic, which is sort of right there in my. I love it, Tony, that as a small town Midwesterner, I get to go to all the small places for the network. So that means Cooperstown, Williamsport, and Dyersville. That's my triangle right there. Love it. And so lots of great stories there. And there's something about when you see. And by the way, as you know this, Williamsport, that win against the Yankees 2 years ago was where it all started for the Tigers. Everything changed in Williamsport. They were transformed, and the love of the game, as you have when you're a kid, they found it, and they never looked back the rest of that regular season. So maybe it'll be that way again.
Absolutely. Well, enjoy your trip. That one is still, of those 3, that one's on my bucket list still to hit, and I will I will hit that one soon. JP Morosi, always appreciate you joining us. Thanks for joining the pod. We'll do it again.
Thanks, Tony.
All right, that was JP Morosi from MLB Network. Always appreciate him taking the time. He is as passionate about the game of baseball as anybody I know, and it's so much fun to see that passion and to hear his stories from his travels all over the country. Follow him on all the social networks, of course, and follow him when he's in Williamsport this weekend. That's going to do it for this edition of the Tigers Today podcast. Look, you got a playoff race on your hands. Tigers, again, we recorded this on Wednesday, August 19th. Tigers going into today, 61-65, 4.5 games back of the White Sox in the American League Central. So not completely out of it, although the White Sox made a pretty damning statement against the Tigers at Comerica Park over the weekend. You know, I was wondering how that was going to play out with the White Sox. Everyone was talking coming into that series that the Tigers have a chance to take over first place if they sweep. And the White Sox, young team, haven't really been in this position before with a lot of these players. They answered the bell, and they came out, and they hit the hell out of the ball, and they took it to the Tigers. They swept the series, and they are firmly in control of the American League Central with about a little less than 40 games to go. So we'll see how that plays out. But the Tigers still are very much in the thick of a very, very crazy wild card race. They were a game out coming into Wednesday. For that last spot, there's 7 teams, 6 teams, something like that. Texas, Minnesota, Toronto, Cleveland, Baltimore, Detroit, Seattle for one spot. That's going to be interesting. So even though it might be mediocrity, at least it's going to be interesting. I've always said that if you're going to be a bad baseball team, or you're going to be a not great baseball team, at least be interesting. And I think we can all agree that it's going to be interesting to see how this thing plays out down the stretch. We talked about Fangraphs odds earlier. Tigers odds going into today were about 18% to make the playoffs. Just remember, at the beginning of the season, they were 60% to make the playoffs. The White Sox were 1%, and now the White Sox are 50%, and the Tigers are 18%. That'll do it for this edition of the Tigers Today podcast. Appreciate John Paul Morosi from MLB Network joining us. Be sure to check out DetroitNews.com for all your Tiger coverage from Chris McCoskey, myself, John Neo, Bob Winowski, everybody. And also be sure to become a subscriber at DetroitNews.com. We always have subscribers specials going on. I do not know what the subscriber special is at DetroitNews.com right now, but there's always some deal to get in. And if you become a subscriber, you get access to all content across all Detroit and Michigan sports. And on the Tigers front, you get access to analysis, recaps, game, news, notes, breaking news, everything, columns, photos, videos, you name it, you want it, you get it at the touch of a fingertip. No paywall, no pesky paywall if you become a subscriber. So be sure to do that. And also be sure to like, subscribe, whatever else I'm legally obligated to tell you to do when you have a podcast. Do all that stuff wherever you get your podcasts, or if you're watching this on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, God bless you. I shaved this week just for you. You're welcome. And that's going to do it for this edition of the Tigers Today podcast. You can go watch the last podcast with Alex Avila. You can listen to all the other podcasts we've done, and we'll be back with you as this playoff race continues to heat up in the American League. It's going to be wild. That'll do it for this edition of the Tigers Today podcast. I'm Tony Paul with the Detroit News. Have a good day, everybody.